Hey, have I got a project for you? I mean, who doesn't need a new bag? To make this bag, you're going to need a piece of fabric for the outside of the bag, fabric for the lining, and fabric for a pocket. You'll also need a piece of batting and two zippers. I'll give you the dimensions for the fabric as I go through the video. There's really no need to go out and buy yardage unless you want to. You could definitely make this bag using scraps of fabric and piece them together prior to assembling the bag. To get started, we're going to work on the outside pocket for this bag. And for the outside pocket, you're going to need two pieces of fabric, one for the outside of the pocket and one for the lining of the pocket. And if you have directional fabric, you'll want to take note of that so that you have the pocket positioned in the right direction. For the fabric for the outside of my pocket, I've cut that fabric at 8 inches by 15 inches. So it's going to be 15 inches wide, 8 inches tall. And you'll want to cut that so that the direction of fabric is going the way you want that to go if it's directional. And the lining for this pocket, I've cut 9 inches by 15 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to line the top edge of the pocket up with the lining, right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam across that. Once we've sewn across the top of our pocket, we're going to press our seam allowance towards the lining. We're going to fold our pocket in half so that the bottom edges line up, and what this does is it brings the lining to the front side of your pocket so you have like a little binding. It looks like a little binding, but it's kind of fake. From here, we're going to put a piece of batting in between the two layers of fabric so that the wrong sides of our fabric are touching the batting, and the batting is pushed up to the top of this seam that's in here, and we want to line that up so that's a nice straight edge. And then we're going to fold the outside of our pocket back onto the binding, and we're just going to make sure that it's sitting really neatly and that seam allowance that we've pressed is sitting nice and flat. From here, we're just going to pin the batting in place and make sure all layers are held together tightly, and then we're going to quilt this so that the batting stays in place. And you can quilt this however you like. I did parallel lines that are about 1.5 inches apart. So to mark my lines so that I stayed on track and kept them parallel, I used a 45-degree angle to get the first line put in place, and I used washi tape when I first started to mark the line so that I could sew along the line of the washi tape, and I spaced the washi tape about 1.5 inches apart. After a while, I kind of got done with using the washi tape, and I went to using an erasable marker. You can do one of these methods, or if you have a guide on your sewing machine to do the even spacing, that helps. That makes it really easy. So I continued sewing parallel lines across the quilt pocket, and then I went in the opposite direction to get the cross hatching. Once you've finished quilting the pocket, you're just going to want to trim off the excess batting and square up this pocket. Now that we've finished our outside pocket, we're going to work on the outside of our bag. And to do this, you're going to need a piece of fabric that is 24 by 15 inches. And then you're going to need a piece of batting that's slightly bigger than your fabric. And we're not going to put a backing on this right now. We're just going to do quilting through the fabric and the batting. So with no fabric on the back of this, it's not a complete quilt sandwich. It's just fabric and batting. So you'll need a piece that's 24 by 15, and you can piece this together. If you wanted to do this with strips or squares, you could definitely do that, or scraps. You could piece together fabric and then just make sure that it's cut out 15 by 24. And if you're using directional fabric like I'm using here in the video, you're going to need to make sure that it's going in the right direction, and you're going to have to sew this together in the middle so that your fabric is in the right direction. So for my owls, for their heads to be going in opposite directions, I have a seam in the very center of this panel where I've put them together. So if you have directional fabric, you'll have to piece it together because where the top of each owl is one side is the front of my bag, and then the other owl's head is the top of the other side of the bag. So if you have directional fabric, you'll need to cut it in half, orient it the correct way, and then put a seam down the middle of it, and you still want that to finish at 24 by 15. If you want the quilting that you did on your pocket to match your bag, you can bring that pocket piece over to your fabric and lay it out, and then use it as a guide to mark your front fabric so that you can do the quilting on the front fabric. So I wanted mine to be all at the same angle and match up as close as possible. So I laid out my pocket on what I'm considering the back of my bag. So my owl that's centered is going to be the front of my bag, and the other side is going to be the back of my bag. So I laid my pocket out on the fabric that was going to be the back of my bag, and then I used washi tape and a ruler to mark my first line to get started. Once I had my first line marked, I just continued marking every line 1.5 inches apart, just like I did on the pocket. Once I had all my parallel lines sewn that were going in the same direction, I used the pocket once again to mark the lines that were going perpendicular to the ones I just did. Once your quilting has been completed, you'll need to cut off the excess batting and square up your fabric. Now that we have our fabric quilted, we're going to attach the back pocket. So we want to measure down on the back side of our bag, whatever the back side of your bag will be. We want to measure down 9 inches, and then we're going to align the bottom edge of the pocket to this mark, this 9-inch mark. So we're going to put our pocket down that we completed, and we want the bottom edge of the pocket to touch our 9-inch line. So we're going to line that up and pin it in place, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam across the bottom edge of this pocket to attach it to the bag. Your pocket should be laying down so that it's lining side up, and the very top edge of your pocket is going towards the top edge of the front of the bag. Once you have the pocket attached to the bag, we're going to iron that so that it's laying towards the back of the bag, and then we're going to go back and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the seam that we already sewed so that we're sewing it towards the back of the bag. Now that we have this outside pocket attached to our bag, we're just going to set this aside for now. We're going to start working on the inside pocket. For the inside zipper pocket, you're going to need a piece of fabric that's cut 8 inches by 12.5 inches, and you're going to need a 7-inch zipper. So to get started with this, you're going to want to fold this pocket material in half lengthwise and you want that seam marked so you know where the center is. Then we're going to take a piece of fabric that we want as our lining for our bag, and we're going to cut it to the finished size of our bag. So after you quilted that bag and trimmed it, you want to cut a piece of lining that's the exact same as that. And you also want to fold this piece of fabric in half lengthwise so that you get a center marking for one top edge. Once you have the center line for each piece of these fabrics marked, you want to line that center line up together, the two pieces of fabric on top of each other, right sides together. And then we're going to take some kind of marking pen, and we want to mark a straight line 3 inches down from the top of this fabric. Once we've done that, we want to pin the smaller pocket material to the lining material. So here I'm going to use a piece of washi tape to help me get the shape I want to sew. So I'm going to take a piece of washi tape and I'm going to put it over the teeth of the zipper. I want a piece of washi tape that is big enough to go over the teeth of the zipper and allow me enough space to pull the zipper open. So I ended up landing on this blue tape right here, and it's about a 1/2 inch wide. It's just slightly less than a 1/2 inch wide when I measured it out. And I want to take this piece of tape and I'm going to actually lay it out, and I'm going to cut this piece of tape to be 5.5 inches long. So I know this is probably a different way to put a zipper in, but I've laid my washi tape out and I'm going to mark it so that it's 5.5 inches long, and then I'm going to cut the tape. So my washi tape is about a 1/2 inch by 5.5 inches long. So now I'm going to fold my washi tape in half so that I get a center marking on it. I'm going to fold it so that the smooth sides are together so it doesn't stick upon itself. And then I'm going to line this washi tape up with the center line of my washi tape with the center line of the fabric and the top edge of the washi tape with the line that I drew on my fabric, the line that I drew 3 inches down. So I'm going to line that up and I'm going to stick that down. So here I'm pinning my washi tape down because it's kind of old and not very sticky. But if you have very sticky washi tape, you don't need to pin it. But what we're going to do is, now that we have the washi tape down, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we are going to sew completely around the washi tape. We're just going to follow the edges of the washi tape and then sew completely around that tape and then overlap the seam a little bit. So if you don't have washi tape and you don't want to do this method, you can always just draw a parallel line a 1/2 inch from a line that I told you to draw, and then measure the space to be 5.5 inches long, and then sew on that line that you drew. But here is the stitching that I've done around my washi tape, and now I can remove my washi tape. So now we need to cut in the center of this space we just sewed. So we're cutting in between the lines that we sewed. And then we're going to kind of clip into the corners. The closer that you can clip into the corners without clipping through your stitching, the easier it'll be to turn this right side out. From here, we're going to take our pocket fabric and we're going to push it through this hole. So you're going to have to work with this a little bit. Once you get the fabric pushed through, lay it out, see what it looks like and how it's laying. You want the corners to lay as flat as you can get them. Sometimes they pucker a little bit. If you need to, you might have to push the fabric back through again, clip your corners a little more, do a little bit of trimming, and then go through this process again of pushing the fabric back through the hole again. But you're going to work this a little bit to get it to lay flat. You want to finger press your seams, and then once you get this to where you think it's nice and flat, you'll take it to an iron and you'll give this a good pressing. Once you press your fabric, it should look something like this. From here, we're going to put the zipper in, and we want to put the zipper behind this to the ugly side, I'm going to say, and we want the zipper to be centered from top to bottom, and then from left to right, you want to align it so that when you sew this zipper in, you don't sew over any of the metal tabs that are in the zipper. So you can open the zipper and you can move the zipper down from right to left how you want it. Just situate it so that you're not going to sew through any of the metal parts of the zipper. To hold this zipper in place, you can pin it in place. For me, I thought it was easier to glue it. So I have this glue stick. It's a little messy because it's so big, but it did a really good job of gluing the zipper in place. I put the glue down and then I put the zipper in place, and then I just let it dry a couple of minutes before I took it to the sewing machine. When you glue this down, just make sure that your zipper pull is in the opening that we made in the pocket, and that your metal parts of the zipper are going to be out of the way of your sewing. So when you flip this over, you just want to make sure that your zipper is centered from top to bottom, and then you're going to be able to sew right around the edge of this opening to hold the zipper in place. Once you have your zipper situated the way you want it, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to sew around this opening, and you're going to sew close to the edge. Once your zipper is sewn in place, we're going to come back and we're going to trim the zipper. So if you have extra lengths of zipper, you want to trim that off. And we're going to end up sewing this pocket closed. So you kind of want to fold the pocket up and see what part of the zipper is going to be in the seam allowance. And if you can trim that back so that no part of the zipper is in the seam allowance, you'll have less thickness to sew over. So here I'm just trimming the ends of my zipper so that they're a 1/4 inch away, or a little more than a 1/4 inch from the edges of this smaller piece of fabric. Once I have the zipper trimmed, I'm going to fold this smaller piece of fabric in half, and I'm going to fold it so that the bottom edge of it comes to the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down the sides of this, not catching the larger piece of fabric in the seam. So I'm going to hold it under the sewing machine so that I only catch the edges of the pocket and I sew them closed. And you don't need to sew across the top of this because it's going to be in the seam allowance when you put your bag together. So once the pocket is finished, we're going to go on to making a strap or handle for this pocketbook. And you're going to need fabric that's cut 4 inches wide, strips of it. And here I've cut myself 3 strips that are 40 inches long. If you have shorter fabric than that, you can keep adding it together. And we're going to sew these together into one long strip. And you're going to need 105 inches of fabric that is 4 inches wide. Once you've sewn your strips together and you have one continuous piece of fabric, you're going to iron this so that it is 1 inch wide. So you're going to iron it in half with wrong sides together, and then you're going to iron the edges in to meet the middle seam. Once you have that ironed, we are going to open it up and then we're going to fold it so that we have right sides together on the end, and then we're going to sew that seam closed, the one on the very edge of the fabric. Then you'll need to clip the corners and turn the fabric right side out, and then you're going to fold it back into the position that you had it in, where it's a 1-inch wide strip. Once the edges of your handles are sewn, you're going to top stitch down the length of the strip, and you want to do it about 1/8 inch from each side of the strip. Now we're ready to attach our handles to our bag. And the first thing you need to do is to find the center of your bag. And for me, that's really easy because the center of my owl is the center of my bag. So from the center of your bag, you want to measure over 2¼ inches, and that's where you're going to place the inside edge of the handle. So for this handle, I decided to glue it in place. You can definitely pin it in place, but for me, it was easier to use a glue stick. Here I have a scrap piece of paper just because the glue stick is a little bit messy, and I'm just going to put my strip upside down on the scrap piece of paper and put a little bit of glue on it to hold it into place. I've had real good luck with this glue stick. It doesn't gum up my sewing machine needle, and it seems to hold the fabric in place really well. When gluing or pinning your handle onto your bag, you want to stop 2 inches before the top edge of the bag and put some kind of pin or marker there so that you don't sew into the space, because we're going to stop sewing the handle 2 inches before the top edge. For the handle, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to put the 11-inch mark right on the top edge of my bag, because I want my handle to come up 11 inches from the top of my bag, and then it's going to go across 4½ inches and then back down to the bag 11 inches. And that's how I'm going to glue that into place. As you're gluing the handle down or you're pinning the handle in place, keep in mind that the first 2 inches of the handle towards the top of the bag we're not going to sew, so you'll need to put a mark that you're not going to sew in this area. And then keep in mind as well, there's 4½ inches between the two handles. The inside dimension is 4½ inches. You'll just continue gluing this handle onto the back of the bag until you get around to the top of the pocket on the back. And then you're going to stop gluing at the top of the pocket, because that's where we're going to stop sewing. We're going to sew around to the top of the pocket on the back of the bag. So you're going to want to put something at the top of your pocket, a little pin or something, to remind yourself that when you're sewing this handle down, that you want to stop at this point and actually turn your stitches around. So as your handles come off the back of the bag, you can align them with the handles on the front. They should be the same length and they should be aligned the same way. And then you're just going to bring them down the back of the bag and glue them in place, reminding yourself that you need to put a pin where the top of the pocket is so that you don't sew past that point. If you have your strap laid out correctly, the two ends should meet up together on the back of your bag. As you're working your way around this bag and you're laying this out and pinning it in place or gluing it, your ends of your strap should meet. They should meet perfectly together at the bottom of your bag. So here you can see the two pieces of strap meeting each other, and the seam that I have right there in the bottom of the bag is not center for my panel. I had to shift it a little to get the birds to fit in the way I wanted them to do, so that is not the perfect center for the bag. Actually where the two straps meet is the center of the bottom of my bag. Once you have the straps in place, you want to actually sew them to your bag. So how I did this is I started at the bottom of my bag and I went up to that 2-inch mark by the handles, and then I backstitched. I went straight across that area, and then I backstitched and came down the other side of the strap. And then when I came around again, I did the same thing. I stopped at that mark 2 inches below the top of the bag. I backstitched, I went across, I backstitched again, and then I came down the other side of the strap. So now it looks like I have 4 seams in my strap. 2 of them are holding the strap to the bag. So your strap should now be sewn down to your bag, and it should stop about 2 inches from the top edge of the front of your bag, and then on the back it should stop at the top of the pocket, which should be close to 2 inches from the top of your bag. It's really not essential that it be exactly 2 inches. We just don't want to take it up all the way to the edge. So now it's time to sew the top zipper into the bag. It's a 14-inch zipper, and connect our lining and finish this project up. To get the zipper ready to put in place, you need to measure 2 inches from the edge of the zipper, and that's the non-pull side. And then I cut 4 pieces of fabric that are 2 1/4 by 1 1/2 inches, and we're going to sew them onto the zipper. We're going to sandwich the zipper in the middle of 2 pieces of these fabric, and we're going to sew across the zipper on the line that we marked. So that 2-inch line that we marked, we want that to be approximately where our seam is going to go. And we're going to put our fabric together, and we're going to sew across that piece of fabric on the end. So here you can see the seam in the fabric, and then I'm going to pull that back to cover up the end of the zipper. And then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew across this 1/4 inch from where the fold line is there. Now we can go ahead and trim the zipper. Now we're going to lay the zipper out with the tab at the end, and we're going to trim the tab so it's even with the sides of the zipper. So now we need to measure our zipper to make sure we have it the right length to fit the top of this bag. When you trim this piece of fabric up and you squared it off, it may have come out a little smaller or a little bigger than what mine did, and that doesn't matter. We just want to make sure the zipper is going to fit the top of this bag. So we're going to lay the zipper out so that the tab we sewed on the right is even with the right side of the bag. The zipper is nice and flat, and we're going to smooth that over till we get to the other side of the bag. This is the left side of the bag, and we're going to mark where the zipper meets the edge of that bag. And from that mark, we're now going to measure in 2 inches and make a mark on our zipper. This mark is going to be the sewing line for our tab. We're going to lay a piece of our tab fabric out, and our tab fabric was 2 1/4 inches by 1 1/2 inches. We're going to lay that so that it's face up, right side up, and then we're going to put our zipper on that piece of fabric, and we're going to move it so that that sew line that I said to mark is 1/4 inch from the raw edge. And then we're going to sew across the 2 tabs, catching the zipper in between. We want to make sure the zipper pull is to the right of this. If you have the end of the zipper to your left, you want to make sure that your zipper pull is going to be situated so that it's in between the 2 tabs that we have on the zipper. And we're just going to sew across this like we did for the other tab, 1/4 inch from the raw edge of your fabric, and it should be going through that marked line on the zipper. Once you have sewed the tab to the zipper, you're then going to fold it back so that right sides are out, and you're going to sew again over this tab 1/4 inch from the fold line, and then we're going to trim this little tab piece, and we're going to cut off the excess zipper. To hold my little tabs together, I just used a little bit of glue. They just kind of need to be held in place until you sew them into the top of the bag. We're now ready to put this all together and put our top zipper in. This piece right here is the lining, and I'm just going to take a little bit of my glue stick and I'm going to glue the top of that pocket together. Just put a little bit of glue in there to hold it together, and then I'm going to put a little bit of glue between the pocket and the lining to get that stuck together so that I can get this lined up and ready to sew. Here I'm using my trusty glue again, and I'm putting glue on the right side of the zipper on the very edge, and I'm going to glue the zipper to the right side of the back side of the bag. And you can use clips for this if you like. I just find it's hard to get everything in place. And for me, pins are really awkward to try to get through a zipper. So I'm just working with my glue here. I'm gluing the right side bottom edge of the zipper, and then I'm going to put that to the top edge of the back of my bag. And I'm just going to lay that in place, and I'm going to push it down and smooth it out. Once your zipper is in place, you're going to want to put your lining on top of your zipper, and you want the right side of your lining to be touching the right side of your bag. And here you can see my lining, and you can see the wrong side of the lining up, and you can see the pocket in the lining. So you just want to line up your edges and pin or clip these in place however you can find to attach these so that you can get it to the sewing machine and keep everything lined up. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch across this to hold everything in place. Once we finished with that seam, we're gonna flip our bag right side out. We're gonna give it a little ironing, a little pressing, and then we're gonna top stitch a 1/4 inch from the folded line that we just sewed in. Now we're ready to attach our other side of our zipper. So we are going to fold up our bag, the quilted part of our bag, so that it's right sides together, and we're going to pin that to the top edge of the zipper. Now we're going to flip our bag over, and we're going to pull the lining up so the lining is folded up right sides together, and we're going to take the raw edge of the lining and we're going to line that up with the unsewn edge of the zipper. We'll pin or clip our lining in place, and then we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the raw edge, and we're going to be sewing the outside of the bag, the zipper, and the lining together. Once we've finished the seam, we'll turn the bag right side out and we'll press the seam nice and flat. We are not going to top stitch alongside of this seam because it's just going to be too difficult to get under the sewing machine. So from here, we just want to look at our sides, our raw edges, and we want to make sure that they're nice and straight and even. And if they're not, if the batting has squished out a little bit or your lining ended up shifting a little bit, you just want to even this up, trim it up a tiny bit. We want to make sure that we have a nice straight edge when we go to sew this together. If your edges are looking perfect, you can definitely skip this step. Now we're going to sew our sides shut, and we're just going to use a 1/4 inch seam to sew the side shut, and we're going to have the right side of the bag out. We're going to do a French seam, so first we'll go through here and sew a seam a 1/4 inch with the right side out, and then we're going to go in and we're going to trim that seam a little bit. We just want to make sure, once again, you have no loose threads. Your seam is a little less than a 1/4 inch, and you're going to trim it. Once you've sewed your side seams and clipped your corners, we're going to turn the bag inside out. Once we have the bag inside out, we're going to press these seams that we just sewed in. We're just going to press them nice and flat, and then we're going to take them to the sewing machine, take the bag to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew down the sides once again with the bag inside out. And when you sew down the sides, you want to make sure that you're not catching the seam allowance that is in the sides of the bags. You want to sew slightly off of that so that when you turn the bag right side out, you're not seeing any of those seam allowances. Once we have those side seams in, we're going to square off the bottom corners. To help you do this, you're going to want to finger press a line in the bottom of your bag that would be the center of your bottom of your bag. To box this corner, you want to pull this corner so that the side seam lines up with the bottom center of your bag. If there was a line there, it would line up with that. And you want to pin this down. And this area should make, two sides of it should make a 90-degree angle, and the other line that we're going to draw in would be a 45-degree angle. And what we're going to do is from the point of this, so we've laid this out, so our side seam is running in line with what would be the center of the bottom of the bag. And you really can't see it, but I have like a finger pressed line in the bottom of my bag that I'm lining up. And then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure down from the point of this bag, the point of this corner, 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to draw a line across this corner. And this line should be at a 45-degree angle. If this 45-degree angle is laid out correctly, on the sides of your bag, which make the 90-degree angle, the line should meet at 2 inches from the point on each side of the corner, and then the center point should be 1.5 inches from the center point up the center of your bag. Once you have this line drawn in, you want to take it to the sewing machine and you want to sew across this line, tacking or back stitching at the beginning and the end. And then you want to pay attention to your side seam, and you want to push your side seams in the same direction. So if you want to push them both to the front of your bag, that's fine, or both to the back of your bag, that's fine. They just should both be going in the same direction. And most of the time it's recommended that you press them towards the back of your bag. Once your corners are boxed, you can turn this bag right side out and it is complete. It's finished. Way to go if you've stuck with me this long through the video. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider commenting and liking and subscribing. Thank you very much. Have a good day.